What if the most feared air force in the world was led by a general whose ambition dwarfed his caution? Imagine a strategy so reckless it sealed the fate of an entire aerial power. This isn't just a battle. It's the story of a mad general, a doomed Luftwaffe, and the catastrophic decisions that led to their ultimate destruction. November 1943. The sky over Europe looks hard and certain. Luftwaffe reputation still bites. Spain, Poland, France, the Low Countries, the Eastern Front. A record written in contrails and wreckage. Crews believe in that record. Commanders brief with confidence. The story says German fighters will appear at the perfect point, break the bombers and vanish. It feels inevitable. But inevitability cracks under arithmetic. The flaw is layered, not singular. Overreach. Production limits. Fuel scarcity. Instructor attrition. New Allied methods, arriving faster than expected. The Luftwaffe's old strength. Decisive places, concentrate elite pilots at decisive places, turns brittle when the number of decisive places multiplies across a continent. One group can save one sector. It cannot save all sectors when missions come day after day, lane after lane. Listen to the numbers. Every lost BF 109 or FW 190 is not just metal, it is hours of training fuel. It is an instructor pulled from the line. It is a veteran who cannot be replaced at the same tempo. The training pipeline thins. The veteran cadre shrinks. Replacement pilots arrive with fewer hours and less gunnery. Maintenance crews fight shortages of spares. Rail lines move slowly under pressure. Time to repair extends. Turnaround lengthens. The calendar becomes an enemy. Meanwhile, the enemy changes shape. Allied bomber streams no longer fly into fixed traps. Radar plots improve. Navigation tightens. The formations thicken. But the key is not only the bombers. It is the fighters that begin to think differently about their job. Not a tether. A spear. The question shifts from how to hold a tight halo over the box to how to deny the Luftwaffe the chance to mass in the approach lanes at all. If the interceptors cannot gather, the perfect attack never forms. If the attack never forms, losses fall. If losses fall, the bomber offensive becomes sustainable. On the ground, the signs are small but constant. Fuel bozers parked under camouflage nets longer than planned. Crates of parts that do not arrive on the date the schedule predicted. A staffel returns short of 2 aircraft, next week short of 3. The best men spend more time flying combat and less time in classrooms with the new men. Skill that should compound bleeds. Morale follows the math. Optimism gives way to calculation. Calculation points toward a cliff. Night and day tell different stories now. At night, flares and searchlights still bite. But by day, cracks show. The RAF and the 8th Air Force push more raids into deeper airspace. The escort envelope stretches. New drop tanks appear on the hard stands like extra lungs. Briefings include phrases that were once caution and now become orders. Push ahead. Sweep the lanes. Take the fight forward. A doctrine is about to pivot, and when doctrine pivots, the rhythm of a war can change in weeks, not years. The flaw sits at the nexus of fuel pilots and time. Germany can build excellent fighters, but excellence without volume becomes a trap. The Allies can build in volume and learn fast, and volume plus learning bends curves. The Luftwaffe needs quiet hours to fix airframes to teach rookies to rotate veterans. Instead, it receives alarms, scrambles, and return fields under strafing. Each alarm steals a lesson. Each scramble spends fuel meant for training. Each strafing pass burns tomorrow's sortie. Look closer at a single morning. Dawn haze. Ground crews run the line. One aircraft red-tagged for a magneto issue. Another needs a prop governor. The chief mutters about bearings. A truck is late from the railhead. A telephone rings. Intercept order. Wheels up with what is ready, not what is optimal. They climb, they fight, they land short on fuel. On final, they see craters beyond the threshold from yesterday's visit by enemy fighters on their way home. Repairs will take the rest of the day. The window for lessons closes again. What looks like sudden collapse later is the sum of these mornings. The aura meets attrition. The myth meets math. And someone new has arrived to press the advantage with a rule that sounds reckless on paper and feels liberating in a cockpit. He will unclip the tether and tell fighters to do what fighters were built to do. The 6th of January, 1944. A cold wind over English hardstands. A new commander steps into the briefing rooms of the 8th Air Force. James H. Doolittle, test pilot, speed record holder, Tokyo Raider. A man who reads data like a map and gambles only when the odds can be bent. He studies the charts, loss curves, escort radii, abort rates. He listens to crews. He walks the lines, P-47 seconds with fresh drop tanks, P-38 seconds with revised tactics, P-51 seconds, arriving in numbers that change what range means. He hears the old instruction echoing in every squadron: stay with the bombers. Hold the halo. Do not chase. He does the arithmetic. Staying close bleeds initiative. It invites ambush at the edges of the box. It protects some bombers for 1 hour and sacrifices the campaign over months. He writes a new rule in plain language. Fighters will not wait. Fighters will go forward. Sweep the route. Break up the German assembly. If the enemy will not rise, make him rise. If he rises, destroy him. And on the way home, strike his airfields, rails, and fuel. The room feels the change. It is simple on paper. It is radical in practice. Escorts become hunters. The leash comes off. Risks stack immediately. Fuel margins tighten. A pilot who chases too far can return to empty tanks. A section that dives on a target of opportunity may break radio cohesion. A group stretched ahead of the bombers may be late to the rally. Doolittle accepts those risks because the payoff sits upstream of the bomber stream itself. If the Luftwaffe cannot gather, it cannot mass. If it cannot mass, it cannot kill at scale. And if it cannot kill at scale, the bomber offensive survives long enough to matter. This is not bravado. It is a system choice. It ties doctrine to hardware now on the field. The P-51 alters the geometry. With external tanks, it can ride shotgun deep into Germany, then still fight. The P-47, heavy and savage in a dive, now carries more gas and roams farther. The P-38 improved and rebriefed contributes sweeps and top cover where the air is thin and cold. Range is the hinge. Doctrine is the door. He moves pieces that are not airplanes. Debriefs shift. Instead of only, how did we protect the box intelligence, asks, where did they try to form up, at what altitudes from which airfields, and how fast did they react? Controllers begin to seed patrols along likely convergence lanes. Weather officers learn to forecast not just turbulence and icing, but where cloud breaks will pull German fighters into predictable windows. Photo interpreters mark dispersal areas, flare stacks, locomotive sidings, and fuel bowsers. These are now fighter targets, not just bomber targets. Skeptics are not fools. They fear the empty circle over the bombers when the timing slips. They carry names of lost friends who died when cover strayed. Doolittle does not ignore them. He builds timing gates into the plan. He staggers escorts. He assigns forward sweep close cover and trailing cover in layered bites. He drills point area and return so that even an aggressive chase ends at a known rejoin line. He insists on discipline inside the freedom. Then he adds a blade the Luftwaffe will feel on the ground. Strafing on the home leg becomes policy, not an indulgence. If fuel and weather permit, hit airfields, hit parked aircraft, hit maintenance sheds, hit the rail spurs that feed replacement parts. Every crater is a delay. Every burned Bowser is a day with fewer sorties. Fighters will not just defend the bombers present. They will degrade the enemy's tomorrow. The first missions under the new logic feel different in the cockpit. The band of sky ahead is no longer forbidden. Lead calls push, sections fan out, contrails draw spears, not halos. Pilots who once counted minutes until turn back now spend them scanning for rising dots and glints off canopies. The fight begins before the target, not at the target. Intercepts are broken early. The perfect German attack run dissolves into scattered merges. Some days are chaos. Some days are quiet because the enemy could not cohere in time. Results come in fragments, then form a pattern. Fewer massed attacks claw into the bomber stream. More single engagements burn over German countryside far from the bomb line. A staffel that would have hit at the IP is now tied up over its own assembly point. Another lands to refuel and taxis past craters from strafing passes an hour earlier. Repairs slip, sorties drop. Training flights are cancelled to conserve fuel. Instructors are pulled back to fight. The pipeline thins another notch. The culture shifts with the sorties. Squadron talk moves from hold your station to own the route. Aggressive pilots thrive, but only within the lanes and timings that keep the whole machine synchronized. Controllers learn new cadences. Intelligence fuses debriefs with photographs of smoking dispersal bays. Maintenance crews fit more shackles for tanks. Armorers load more. 50 belts for ground strafing. It is an ecosystem upgrade, not a single trick. None of this makes the air safe. Losses continue. Weather kills. Flak kills. A bad decision at 25000 feet still kills. But the campaign's curve bends. Initiative lives with the side that chooses where the fight begins. Doolittle chooses ahead of the bombers over the enemy's runways and against the places where German strength is supposed to gather. He does not promise miracles. He promises momentum. By the end of the first weeks, the briefings sound routine in their audacity. Forward sweep. Close cover. Trailing bite. Return leg strikes authorized. If the picture is permissive, hit the fields. If the picture is hot, hold the rejoin. Commanders measure success not only by bombers home but by enemy fighters broken before they ever found their perfect attack. The Luftwaffe begins to feel hunted inside its own air. A general called mad by critics has, in truth, made a careful bargain. Trade local risk for theatre initiative. Trade tight halos for broken enemy assemblies. Trade yesterday's defense for today's offense and tomorrow's delay. The leash is off. The air ahead of the bombers becomes hunting ground. Controllers call the turns. Groups slide forward in layers. One to sweep, one to sit high and ugly, one to bite from behind if the picture turns. The change is felt in the first minutes after coast-in. Radios stay clipped short spare. Push. Angels 2 to 5. Contacts climbing. The ambush belongs to whoever arrives first. Range makes it possible. Drop tanks clip to pylons like second lungs. Pilots tap gauges and watch the clock. They know the math. They trust it now. P51 seconds ride high and long the point of the spear. P47 seconds dive like anvils and break up anything that forms. P38 seconds hold the cold altitudes and fence off the top. The geometry stretches deep. There is no safe lane to gather, no quiet corner to build the perfect attack. Then comes the week that proves the doctrine has teeth. February 20 to 251944. Operation Argument. Big week. Not one raid but a drumbeat. Aircraft plants. Rail nets. Air depots. Each day sets a new table. Each escort plan starts with the same verbs: sweep, split, strike, then adapts on the fly. Weather is a third player, fickle and cruel. When the cloud breaks, fights begin at once. When it closes, escorts flex to keep timing gates intact. The intent never changes. Meet the Luftwaffe before it can mass, and keep meeting it again and again until the calendar hurts more than any single loss. The first merges happen far from the bomb line. German controllers vector Gruppen to the lanes they know by habit. But habit is an enemy now. American fighters are already there. High cover pounces on a climbing schwarm before it reaches its altitude. Mid-cover cuts a trail of rising dots into splinters. A few break through, always a few, and slash at the bomber stream. Tail gunners work, contrails whip and shear. A fort drops away on fire. The escorts wheel back in and tear the rest of the intercept into singles and pairs. The one perfect run becomes a dozen scattered duels, and scattered duels do not stop a bomber column. On the home leg, the war does not stop. It turns inward. Pilots roll in on airfields, rails and fuel. No heroics, no long lectures, just short runs with guns hot. Parked aircraft, dispersal bays, Bowser trucks. Locomotives linked to flat cars of spares. The 50 seconds hammer. Concrete spits dust. A hangar erupts and collapses like a tent. Fuel flares bloom along a siding. One pass. Two passes if the picture is clean. Then out low and fast to the rally. Every crater is tomorrow's delay. Every burned wagon is a cancelled sortie. The strategy is simple: kill time, not just airplanes. Debriefs shift tone. Pilots sketch the assembly points they caught. Intelligence layers those sketches onto photographs taken hours later: ruptured runways, gouged dispersals, scorched rails. The story is cumulative. A train hit near noon means parts that never reach a field by dusk. A crater near the threshold adds minutes to every landing, every takeoff. Minutes become hours. Hours become maintenance undone. Maintenance undone becomes aircraft that never appear at a scramble bell the next morning. The Luftwaffe still hits back. When weather favors them, they mass and they bite. Some days are brutal, but the balance is tilting. Veteran pilots are being asked to fly, more instruct less. Fuel allocations tighten. Training flights are cut. Replacement pilots arrive with fewer hours and meet their first fights over their own soil against opponents who have already fought 3 missions this week. The arithmetic is merciless and public. Squadrons write it on their chalkboards when they scratch out names for tomorrow's launch. Big week ends, but the method remains. Escort sweeps continue. Raids vary. Targets shift to what the ground war will soon need: rails to the west, yards, bridges. Fighters keep the same language forward: sweep-timed cover, trailing bite-return leg strikes authorized. The Luftwaffe's safe clock the window to form up, climb, attack, reform and land is broken in half. When they try to fix it, someone finds the seam and pulls again. In the cockpit, the difference is felt as permission. Permission to fight where the fight should be, not where doctrine once demanded. Pilots still carry the old caution in their bones. Fuel calculations sit like a second conscience. But the pattern is now muscle memory. When the call comes, bandits assembling 2-0 east of the IP Angels, 1-8, no one asks if they can go. They go. They cut the bridge before the convoy. On the ground, the difference shows in little humiliations that stack into paralysis. Parked aircraft pushed into woods, decoys painted on fields, dispersal bays piled with sandbags and scrap to confuse a camera, camouflage nets over Bowser lines. It all slows the day. It all admits the new truth: the enemy decides when the work stops, not you. And if you cannot decide your own day, you cannot decide the sky. The P-51 becomes an emblem because it delivers the range to make this pattern daily. But the emblem is not the cause. Doctrine is. The decision to turn escorts into hunters. The insistence on layered timing. The discipline that makes aggression a plan, not a spasm. Air superiority is rarely a single thunderclap. It is a pressure system. It settles in. It changes the weather under it. By early spring, the raids feel different in both directions. Allied crews expect to reach deep targets with fewer massed attacks cutting the stream. German crews expect to fight sooner, lower, and often over their own fields. Fear changes sides in small increments, not because one airplane is perfect, but because one method steals the other side's time every day, in daylight without pause. The Blitz is not a headline. It is a rhythm. It begins before the target and continues after. It turns escort into assault. It denies the Luftwaffe, the single thing it needs most, a quiet hour to reset the board. Take that hour away often enough, and even a proud Air Force learns what inevitability really feels like. The response comes hard and fast. New orders on German boards, rally altitudes, vector lines, names that still carry weight: JG2, JG26, JG11, JG3 pulled into the western sky. The plan is simple on the wall, and brutal in the air: hit the stream with mass punch through the escorts, get one clean run at the bombers, and make that one run count. They build special tools for it: Sturmgruppen, W, 190 seconds thickened with armor plates and windscreen blocks, heavy belts of 20 mm and 30 mm, close in, hold fire, fire at knife range, walk shells into aluminum until a fortress opens like a barn door. BF, 110 seconds, and me, 410 seconds, load more cannon and rockets, and are told to go straight at the heart of the box. It is courage by specification, and a wager that one decisive slash can offset the escort's new freedom. It works, sometimes. A day with cloud breaks in the right places, a controller with a perfect plot, a Gruppen commander who times the climb and arrives when top cover is momentarily out of place. The armoured 192nd press into the slipstream behind a close escort and refuse to be shaken. They take hits. They keep coming. A bomber explodes. Another falls in slow arc. For minutes it looks like the old balance has returned. Then the bill arrives. Escorts not tied to the box pivot back in layers. A high cover drops from the sun and rakes the heavy 192nd with long bursts. A trailing bite slashes across the Me 410 seconds before they can reform. The skies fill with single merges, not one grand collision. The Sturm pilots cannot disengage cleanly. The armour that let them press the bombers now traps them against faster opponents in the climb-out. Losses come heavy. Veteran names do not return to the roster. Command searches for angles. Push more fighters to probable lanes. Shift units between sectors. Invent surprise from scarcity. But scarcity rules the day. Fuel allocations tighten. Training flights are cancelled. Replacement pilots arrive with fewer hours. Instructors are pulled back to lead Staffel and die fighting, and every instructor lost is a class of pilots that will never learn properly. Maintenance chiefs strip one airframe to make two flyable. Spares travel slower under rail interdiction. The clock that once gave the Luftwaffe time to fix itself is now a weapon turned against it. Doctrine bends under pressure. There are calls to mass even tighter. Others argue for dispersed swarms, more bites, less risk per unit. Neither answer solves the upstream problem. The enemy chooses where the fight begins. When the Americans sweep early, the German climb becomes combat, not prelude. When the Americans strafe fields on the way home, tomorrow's sortie, count drops before it is even written on the board. Mistakes accumulate because the system is tired. A group is left to hold a sector alone and is late to the merge. A controller clings to habit and vectors to an approach corridor the enemy has already baited. A field keeps aircraft parked too close and loses half a line to a quick strafing run. Defensive minefields are laid around runways and cut rescue times after crash landings. Every fix has a cost. The costs rarely pay back in time. There are bright spots, and they matter to the men who fly. A well-led intercept that breaks an entire attacking wing into pieces. A day when flak and cloud and timing combine and losses bite the Americans hard. Claims fill the mess hall with talk. But the trend is visible even there. Too many new faces at the tables. Too many empty chairs for the veterans who would have told the next class what to do at 20,000 feet when the sun is dead ahead and the canopy glass goes white with glare. On some fields, the humiliation is quiet and daily. Camouflage nets over fuel bozers, decoys painted on tarmac, aircraft towed into woods, dispersal bays rebuilt at night after the return leg attackers ploughed them open in daylight. Repair crews learn to sprint at the first engine note. Trains arrive late or not at all. The rhythm of repair, the hidden backbone of any air force, is broken by small, relentless cuts. Higher command gambles on technology. New types promised. Jets whispered about in briefings. Interceptors that could end this with speed alone. But time is the resource no plan can buy. A jet that flies next month does not defend today's rail yard. Fuel that must be saved for a new engine is fuel not burned training the pilot who will live or die in a prop fighter tomorrow. The math is cruel and public. The calendar favours the side that can fight every day and learn every night. The counter-offensive never truly becomes one thing. It is a series of lunges, brave, often effective in moments that cannot repair the structural damage. The Allies keep their shape. Forward sweep, timed cover, trailing bite, return leg strikes when the picture allows. Weather shifts, who bleeds more on a given day, but weather cannot reverse doctrine backed by volume. By late spring, German controllers talk less about mass and more about survival, how to save pilots, how to hold something back for the next raid, how to keep an airfield open after noon. On paper, the Luftwaffe still fields famous names. In the air, those names now fly with thin benches. The veteran who once taught is now the only shield a raw Kaczmarek has, and when that shield is lost, the unit's knowledge is lost with him. The escorts do not stop coming. The raids do not stop. The craters on runways do not fill themselves. The fuel tanks do not refill as fast as they burn. This is what a desperate counteroffensive looks like when it meets an opponent who has seized initiative and refuses to give it back. Not a grand failure, but a daily one. Not one mistake, but many small ones forced by scarcity. A proud force fighting well and losing ground it cannot see, because the ground is time. The scoreboard never tells the whole story. Columns of claims and losses look loud, but the quiet numbers decide campaigns. Sortie rates, instructor hours, fuel delivered, turnaround times. In early 1944, those numbers move in one direction for the Luftwaffe down, and in another for the 8th Air Force and its partners up. The curve bends fast enough that later it feels like collapse in weeks. In truth, it is momentum made visible. What changed is simple to say and hard to resist. Escorts became hunters, range became routine, timing became layered discipline. Every day the pattern repeats forward, sweep close, cover trailing, bite return, leg strikes, when the picture allows. Every day the pattern imposes cost, where Germany can least afford it. Pilots with experience, fuel stocks that cannot be conjured, repair capacity that needs quiet hours it no longer gets. The result is not a vanishing Luftwaffe. It is an air force forced to fight on unfavourable terms, then to recover on damaged ground, then to fight again before recovery is complete. Look at a single base in March. Morning frost, mechanics in heavy gloves. Last night's repairs ran past midnight. A hangar with a hole through its roof from yesterday's visit by return leg fighters. A rail spur that delivered magnetos every Tuesday now delivers silence because a locomotive burned 2 valleys away. Pilots wait in ready rooms with maps that change daily and fuel ration sheets that grow thinner. A scramble bell rings earlier than expected. They launch with what is serviceable, not what is ideal. They fight climbing. They land to new craters. The cycle restarts. This is not annihilation. It is erosion with a metronome. The strategic meaning appears as a widening set of options for the Allies. Targets deep in Germany no longer imply massed attacks that will certainly carve the bomber stream. Interdiction campaigns begin to bite rails, bridges, marshalling yards. Fighter groups learn to pivot between escort and battlefield preparation with little warning. The pressure is continuous. The Luftwaffe cannot be strong in all places at once, and now all places includes the very air over its staging fields. June arrives with a different horizon. The invasion across the Channel demands air that is permissive, not perfect but permissive, requires superiority, and superiority comes from the winter and spring choices that stole the enemy's time. On and around 6 June 1944, the scale of Allied fighter presence over the beaches, the lodgement and the roads behind it confirms what pilots have felt for months. The initiative in daylight belongs to them. Luftwaffe attacks still happen. They can still be deadly. But they do not arrive in mass with the clock and altitude, both in their favour. Ground columns see Allied fighters as a constant. German columns learn to fear open roads after noon. The cultural shift inside the 8th Air Force settles into doctrine. Aggression with discipline, freedom with gates. Intelligence fused with debrief and reconnaissance until the route feels mapped in layers where the enemy likes to climb, where he tries to reform, where his fuel trucks hide, where one pass on the home leg buys tomorrow's delay. Long-range escort is no longer an experiment. It is infrastructure. P-51, groups plan to the minute. P-47 groups carry the hammer for airfields and rails. P-38 groups fence off the heights. The orchestra plays the same score, even when weather changes the rhythm. Inside, Germany hope rides on new types and last chances. Jets, late-war interceptors, weapons that promise shock. A few fly, a few shock. But promises do not refill fuel bozers or train pilots faster. A jet's speed cannot teach a replacement how to fight his second merge when the first one emptied his lungs and his magazines. New machines enter a system already tired. They make dents. They do not rebuild the engine. The phrase destroyed in weeks is dramatic because the visible part of the curve is steep. Big Week looks like a cliff face on a chart. Spring looks like a slope that grows sharper as more raids land. But precision matters. The Luftwaffe is not erased. It adapts, fights, invents, and bleeds. What ends decisively is its ability to impose its preferred fight on a daily schedule. The Allies choose where and when. The Luftwaffe answers with what it has left. Doolittle's legacy sits at the junction of leadership and arithmetic. He did not conjure range, but he made range decisive. He did not invent courage, but he directed it forward at the times and places where the enemy was most vulnerable. He accepted real risks, fuel margins, timing slips, scattered merges, and offset them with layers, gates, and a culture that prized initiative without losing the plot. He turned an escort force into an offensive instrument, while still measuring success by bombers home and campaigns advanced. The pilots carry the story in their logbooks, missions stacked close, notes about forward sweep and field strike on return that would have sounded reckless a season earlier, now read like routine, names of wingmen crossed out and replaced, weather notes with ice and haze and glare that blinded at altitude. The cost is written in those pages, and no doctrine erases it. But cost without purpose is waste. Here the purpose was to seize the clock and never give it back. By late summer the pattern is so familiar that it is almost invisible. If a German unit tries to rebuild mass at a known lane, someone is already there to break it. If a rail yard gears up to move parts, someone will visit in daylight. If an airfield clears the last crater on its threshold by dusk, fresh holes arrive by noon tomorrow. The pressure feels like weather because it is daily and indifferent. So the story does not end with a trumpet. It ends with a pressure system settling over a continent. Fighters that once circled like shepherds now range like hunters. Bombers that once felt abandoned at the critical minute now watch enemy assemblies dissolve before they form. A proud opponent still flies, still fights, but the calendar is no longer his. That is the point. Not a miracle. A method.